Welcome to the Badlands, a place I don't think I or anyone I'm going to talk to expected to be. My name is Jared, and for the last 9 months, I've been an out-of-work ad agency senior suit. My last role was the Regional Client Service Director at Grey Singapore, delivering work around Southeast Asia and India. I returned to London last year, fully imagining I'd been in another agency fairly quickly, as had been the case over the last 2 decades, but not so much this time. So I found myself wandering the Badlands. In these 9 months, I've noticed a few odd things in our industry, and I've also noticed a surprising amount of ex-colleagues and clients all in a similar position to me. So I thought it might be helpful and maybe interesting to talk to some of these people, to see how they're doing, discover their experiences, understand what they're looking for, and maybe shine a light on them and their talents, but most importantly, check in with them, as it's a lonely experience being in the Badlands. So please welcome Michelle O'Brien. Michelle is a highly experienced marketing leader, having worked with some of the world's most famous brands like Samsung, Mercedes-Benz, and Disney. She clearly knows her stuff. I met her whilst I was living and working in Singapore at Grey, and she was living and working in Singapore at Disney. But like many others, she found herself in the Badlands. So today we're going to discuss what happened at Disney, what she's been doing since, her journey into self-care, and sobriety. And it's been really hard to pronounce that today, Michelle. Her journey into sobriety. So, along with launching her own podcast called The Upward Spiral. So there's quite a few things that I think will resonate with a lot of people listening. So please welcome, live from Singapore, Michelle O'Brien. Michelle, how are you?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
No, you're welcome. I tell you what's daunting. You're the first person who does their own podcast, so I feel like I'm just being judged, and it's awful. Because most people are going, "What are we doing?" I'm like, "Listen, I've seen some of yours. Michelle's wearing a microphone. She's wearing a lapel mic. That's the level of what we're talking about. And she's in a podcast studio in Singapore. I'm in my kitchen with my puppy at my feet. So there's some levels of podcasting going on here, Michelle.
Yeah, but if I'm being honest, I'm hiding at the podcast studio because I don't want to have to go home and deal with like noisy children and dogs and life. So this is the best place for me right now.
I'm slightly envious. We just had an offline chat comparing trench stories of dealing with getting children on the school run and our newfound appreciation of parents who both work and are dealing with kids and stuff. It's mind-bending. So look, it's 9:30 in the morning here. What time is it in Singapore? I've lost my
4:30 in the afternoon. So almost the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we'll get you out of there. I would ordinarily have said to someone, "Just have a drink while we're doing this. It's late in the afternoon for you," but clearly that's not going to work with you. So like I said,
I've got my herbal tea. I've got my herbal tea that I'm getting really into actually. Caffeine free, obviously.
Yeah, well, no doubt you can tell the listeners about the joys of sobriety and some of the brands that kind of, I think, facilitate that a lot more now. We touched on it a while ago when I was living in Australia. I used to drink a non-alcoholic beer called Heaps Normal, and it was genuinely a brilliant drink. There's no alcohol in it, but you didn't know. It was amazing. I think you'll obviously know more. A lot of
so many.
Yeah. So, well, look, absolutely. I think firstly, thank you for doing this. As I mentioned, we kind of met a couple of times in Singapore when I think at Grey we were trying to do some work with Disney. You were launching Disney Plus around Southeast Asia at the time, and at Grey we were trying to get involved with that. So I think that's how we met. It's worth for all the listeners, what I'd like people to do is get a sense of the person who I'm talking to and kind of career you've had and how that could possibly end up in the Badlands as you are. So do you want to give people a bit of a career summary of who you are and what you've been doing?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So my background, actually, let's start even at the beginning. I'm from Manchester originally, if you can't tell from the accent. And I'm sure speaking to a
Singaporean.
Speaking to a fellow northerner, it's going to come out a little bit more as this podcast goes on. Being in Singapore for 10 years hasn't quite neutralized the accent completely.
I can hear it, but I can hear the softness.
Yeah, but when I used to drink, the more I drank, the more mank I would get. I'd end up like Liam Gallagher by the end of the night, which was very charming, as you can imagine. But I'm actually going to start at the beginning. So I was always like actually a really creative child. And on my 14th birthday, see, when I say I'm starting at the beginning, I'm really starting at the beginning. 14th birthday, TBWA came in to my school. And I think we were the first year to do media studies as a GCSE. And they came into school and did a 2-day workshop with us. And during that day, we got to work on a brief for Nike. And we got split up into teams, and everyone took on the roles of either like account manager or creative. Right. And we were taught how to put a campaign together, like taught how to, look at the brief, how to research, how to come up with a creative idea, how to execute, and then how to sell, like how to present to everybody. And in that 2 days, I was just obsessed. And it was also probably around the time that Mel Gibson's What Women Want just came out. And if you can remember that, I think they were also working on a Nike campaign in that movie. But it was like Mel Gibson, Helen Hunt, and He Can Start to Read Women's Thoughts. But they both worked in advertising. And there was a lot of kind of going through that process and the pitching. And I was like 14 years old. I was like, this is for me. This is what I want to do. And from that point on, my education, everything was really focused on not just working in advertising. It was, I wanted to be creative. I wanted to be the person that came up with the ideas and be on that team behind the big ad campaigns. And so in a weird way, my career actually started at 14 in a weird way, because everything with my education, and I used to go back to TBWA in Manchester on my school holidays and go and do work experience with them. Not that I was much help at that point. But yeah, that's how it all started. And had 14 years working in agencies in Manchester, in London and Singapore, and ended up taking on the role as strategy and planning. And loved that kind of combination of like problem solving, of taking a brief and really pulling it apart, getting into the research, understanding the consumer, the insights, and reorganizing, reframing, and really truly understanding the problem. And then I was always a really creative strategist, so would work really, really closely with the creative team on solving that problem, coming up with ideas, and loved it. Like, just loved working in advertising, loved working in agencies, and always started, I really liked working in mid-size agencies, the kind of 50, 60 people, creative shops that were still independent, that were doing the cool work. And 3 times in my career had my agencies been bought out by publicists. Not my personal agencies, obviously. That'd be nice. But agencies I was working for. And that was like Amaze in London. That was, Amaze in Manchester, Holler in London, and an agency called Arcade in Singapore. And it was always really frustrating because no matter what I tried to do to get away from the big networked agencies, I was always pulled back in. But absolutely loved it. Really, really just loved working in agencies, loved the culture, loved the creativity, loved the pace, loved just jumping from project to project and different accounts, and the variety of it. It was definitely for me. And so, yeah, after that, was working at my favorite agency that I worked at was Arcade in Singapore. That got bought out by Publicis. We were merged with Digitas. So a couple of years ago, I was at Digitas working across Coca-Cola for ASEAN, Heineken, and Tiger globally, Tiger beer that is, Samsung for ASEAN as well, and Disney. Disney were one of my clients.
Oh, wow.
And had a lot of fun with them, working on the studio stuff. I got to kind of work on Avengers Endgame, and we had so many big movie releases that year, and agency side got to work on some of kind of the biggest movies of all time, and absolutely just loved it. Very passionate about the brand.
So, how come you ended up in Singapore? I was curious about that, because I know how come you ended up?
So I actually got a little bit very burnt out in London. I'll be really honest, I was really struggling with my work. I was I think it was 27, maybe 26, 27. And I was working in strategy at Holler, and I was on Mercedes, and I was struggling. I was struggling with the work. I was struggling balancing work and life. I was drinking a lot. I was partying a lot. I couldn't get the balance right. And I just felt like I was on a downward spiral. I felt like I was in this cycle and I couldn't get out of it. And I think anybody that knows, what it's like to work in advertising, the work's great, but the culture of it, working in agencies, particularly working in agencies in the UK, it's very work hard, play hard. And I just kind of got to that point where it's like I couldn't do it anymore. And it was really showing in my work as well. Sure. And I got the opportunity to go and work with elephants in Sri Lanka. And took that. Was just like, and I'll be, again, super honest. I was actually on performance review at Holler, and, kind of got my options handed to me, and it was kind of work through it, or it was like take the money and go. And it was all around the time that I got this placement in Sri Lanka. So I was like, hell yeah, I'm taking the money. I'm going. I'm getting out of here. So I booked a one-way ticket to Asia, and weirdly kind of met my husband 6 weeks before, who happened to be a client of Holler. He was at Red Bull at the time, and I told him, don't get attached, I'm leaving in 6 weeks, I've got a one-way ticket to Asia and I'm not coming back. And the fool that he is fell head over heels, and just before I left told me he'd quit his job and he was going to come find me in 8 weeks. So I left, not quite believing this guy that I'd only known for 6 weeks was actually going to do it. But spent a month in Sri Lanka working with elephants, and then went down to Borneo to work on a marine conservation project. And lo and behold, he turned up in Borneo. And like a normal person.
I think there's a Disney film in that, surely.
Well, there's a rom-com in here somewhere. Like a normal person, I totally freaked out though when he got there and was like, this is too much pressure. Like, you've only just quit your job and chased me around the world. And I was like, can we just travel as friends for a bit? So he tells everyone that I blue-balled him for 3 months. I basically was like, I'm just not ready. My head's a mess. I don't know. I was kind of giving it all that. So we traveled as friends for 3 months, and then we, I don't know, Thailand, Malaysia, or abouts, and then we went our separate ways for a few weeks. I went and did yoga and meditation retreat in Bali, and he did I went to yoga and meditation retreat in Cambodia, and he went to surf camp in Bali. And as soon as I was on my own, I was like, oh, I really miss him. And then I was like, shit, what am I doing? Like, I'm totally friend zoning this guy, and he's amazing, and I miss him. And I texted him and said, will you come to Cambodia and meet me? And thankfully he did. And we then spent kind of a month in the Philippines.
You're quite lucky. You're very lucky there, because I've been on surf camp in Bali. So you must have been a very good, I don't know if you've done something, because I'm just saying, I've been on those surf camps, and the draw is, there's a lot of reasons to stay on those surf camps. So that's it.
Yeah. But I think maybe because he was such a terrible surfer, really, really, really bad. Right. That I don't know what his success rate would have been in one of the surf camps in Bali.
This podcast has taken a massive
I know, and we're not naming any names, but he's quite prominent in the advertising industry.
Yeah, we certainly can't name him.
He's gonna love this.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that yet at the moment, but we'll see. He may turn into the hero. He already is.
I know, but it was a happy ending. Like, we came to Singapore because we didn't want to go home. Right. So that's it. We had 6, 7, 8 months traveling, and didn't want to go home, so kind of came to Singapore, and I got offered 3 jobs in a week.
Wow.
And this is 10 plus years ago. This is when things were when employment passes and things were a lot easier. That's the work visa for anyone who's not in Singapore. And so I just that was it. And he got offered another job with Red Bull for the region, and we literally went home for like a couple of weeks, packed up our stuff, and moved back out here. So moved here permanently, with the idea of doing 2 years and then going on to somewhere else. But as with a lot of people who come to Singapore, you kind of Yeah, 2 years turns into 10 very
Well,
quickly.
you've just given me a huge flashback. I lived in Singapore back in 2007 and 8, and I worked at MSC Saatchi at the time, and I'd ended up there, not the exact same story, but a really similar story. I ended up in Singapore, and my boss at the time, the MD of MSC Saatchi, said to me, "You'll either stay for 2 years or 10 years." And I was like, well, how could you possibly know or predict that? You say, well, if you stay for 2 years, you'll have traveled all around Asia. You'll have had a great time working here. You'd have had fun on Singapore. And then you'll go, I miss London, and you kind of want to go back. And I said, well, what about the 10 year? And she said, oh, you'll have had children. You of the healthy culture and the safety
Oh,
and
yeah.
things. And she called it exactly right. And it blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind how right she called it. And the amount of two or tenors that I know is frightening. It's like you're one or the other, basically.
Yeah, it's amazing. And but it's such an easy place to live, especially when you're a little bit older and you're not seeking out loads of new experiences and it's just great.
Though, and we're kind of slightly jumping ahead, but I found the work-life balance in Singapore equally as exciting, and slightly problematic with hindsight. When I was in my late 20s, when I first lived there, there's definitely a work hard, party hard culture in Singapore as well, right? But I think so. Do you think maybe there was an age piece that helped you when you got to Singapore in terms of you'd left London because it was clearly affecting you? And I've been there as well. I left London at one time in my career because I was the exact same place as you've just described. And I went to Thailand and was a diving instructor for a year. This is the same thing. Because I'd lost my mind working so hard. And then the only thing I could do in London, having worked 70 hours that week, was then go out for 20 hours and then go and do it all again for, the next week. It was kind of all that seemed to be in London for me at the time.
Yeah, same.
Did you find that in Singapore a little bit?
Yeah, like when we first moved here, Club Street was a thing.
Yeah,
and they used to shut the roads.
Beaujolais was my downfall when I lived in
Beaujolais was
Singapore
great.
first.
Yeah,
my old ECD, it's literally had the keys to that bar. We could close it. We could stay there as long as we wanted. It was insane.
Yeah, and the guys from Arcade, they owned Gem Bar across the road from Beaujolais.
Cool. Yeah.
And so we used to just be there all the time because our agency owned a bar.
It's genius, but equally problematic.
Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah, but I also think having that time off traveling, when I came to Singapore and started it, because I was at that point where I was like, do I even want to get back into advertising?
Yeah.
Like, do I want to do this and put myself through that again? And then when we got here, I said, I'll give it another go. And I chose this agency, Arcade, because I was looking
for the one with its own bar.
The one with its own bar, yeah. But I chose it because it was just a great size, really great creative shop, and everyone seemed to really take care of each other. And I loved it. It was great. But I did set quite firm boundaries when I went in there, and I really stuck to them. And I think in the 6 years that I was with Arcade, there were probably times during that where some people maybe didn't see me as a team player because I wasn't sitting late. Either I wasn't out and about, and I did in my first few years. I did have my fair share of nights out. It's fine, but like I wouldn't always just be sitting outside on Keong Saik Road drinking until all hours, or I wouldn't be working super late if I wasn't absolutely needed.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of culture of, well, the creatives are all at it and they've got to work through the night to get this work done. And I think the suits and people would sit with them and everything else. But it was like I think sometimes I was perceived as not being a team player because I wouldn't be sitting up all night if I wasn't like absolutely needed for it.
Yeah, it was a major cultural phenomenon I learned early on was my junior team members wouldn't leave until I left, and I didn't know that at the time. So oftentimes I'd be like, why are you still here? And I thought, well, you're here. I was like, yeah, but I'm doing this thing. You've done your thing. So there's little subtle differences that you just have to learn about, isn't there, when you're living and working that?
Yeah, loads as well. And I think because we were in this shop house on Keong Saik, which is in the Chinatown area of Singapore, and it's just this beautiful street with all these beautiful shop houses, the shop house itself became almost like a second home for all of the junior team members who were still living with their parents. Is they could come and they could order food all night, and they could drink, and they could work, and they could stay late. So staying late became it was a really big part of the culture.
I think just for the listeners, sorry to Michelle, there's
okay.
in Asia, you live at home until you're essentially going to get married, right? So the amount of 27, 28, 29-year-old, agency folk who, like you, would have ordinarily, than me, were living in London with your friends, out and about and working hard. They're at home. They live at home. So the place of work is such an important part of their social life because, like I say, it gives them that freedom, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's this thing. I'm very much a morning person. Like, I am jumping out of bed 5:30, 6 o'clock, fresh as a daisy. I train early. But I feel great in the morning, and I'm like getting into work early, and I'm getting on with my day. Whereas in Singapore, even before COVID, there was always that flexibility, and I think a lot of they have very slow mornings, so, generalizing. But I think what we found is that they would kind of come in maybe like 9:30, 10 o'clock, then they'd all go out for coffee, and then they come back, and then there might be a meeting, and then everyone would go out for an hour's lunch, whereas I'm still in that kind of London mindset of, I'm going to just, bring in my home food because it's healthy, and I'm going to eat at my desk because I want to go home at 6 o'clock. Whereas they'll then start their working day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but work in the office until 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're on a little bit of a different schedule to everybody else.
So ultimately, these podcasts are about, not just the joys of living in Singapore ordinarily, but no, it's all part of it because. So from there, you ended up at Disney, and that's how we briefly met when I was in Singapore previously. How did you go from agency to client side, and then you can share as much or as little as you want of the Disney experience, but ultimately it led to time in the Badlands, which has then led to, all of these amazing positive things that have come out of what was, from what you described to me offline, a pretty shitty experience. So I think it'd be good for the listeners to hear that, because part of my podcast, Michelle, is what I've discovered is people like the listeners like hearing things that resonate with them, or think, actually, that's like me, or I could do that, or I need to think about that. So I think it'd be super useful. And again, as much or as little as you want, but to share your agency to Disney and then Disney downward spiral by the sounds of things, and then how that led to some amazing things.
Sure. Sorry, we digressed a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah, so
setting the scene.
Yeah, Singapore Tourism Board can get in touch, and we can be advocates and we can be ambassadors for sure.
Yeah. So Disney were one of my clients. I'd been working on them for a couple of years, and on the studio side, and just loved working for them. And I got a phone call from one of the recruiters one day at Disney saying, we're launching Disney Plus in the region. Would you apply for this role? We are really interested in talking to you. You've got, some great recommendations from people within the business. And that was great. So yeah, of course you don't kind of say no to Disney, and went through the process. And the process actually took quite a while. And what I didn't tell them was I was pregnant at the time. This has got nothing to do with being laid off, by the way, but just I just had to make them sound really bad. No, they were actually great about it, but I didn't actually tell them I was pregnant throughout the whole process, and because it was COVID, everything was kind of done under a desk, so no one could actually see the big belly. And so as soon as the employment pass, which is a visa, was approved and I was offered the job, and my work visa was done, I then kind of sprung it on them that I was 6 months pregnant. Being a family company, they took it really well. They were like, okay, cool. Well, your first job in your new role is to find your maternity cover, which I did. I found a great girl, and she was fantastic. But the role was head of social and influencer marketing for Disney Plus. and it was to oversee kind of content marketing in the context of social media and an influencer for the launch of Disney Plus in Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. We did just as I arrived, we'd just finished Indonesia. So then we had, as I was kind of responsible for, I took over Indonesia, and then I was responsible for the 7 other market launches, which all kind of happened one after the other.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot, but it was incredible. I think the team, they brought in this really amazing team from all over, kind of different experts, and there was this real startup mentality. It was just like a startup, and everyone was just so talented. We were all pitching in, we were all on it, we were all just working to get it done. And you think kind of Disney would be really organized in the background, and it wasn't. It was very, very messy and very complicated. But it was just such an incredible learning curve, going from kind of the advertising agency side to really being very close to product and understanding lifecycle acquisition, customer service, as well as kind of brand marketing, which is where I sat. And it was just, honestly, it was a really amazing experience. Like we launched Singapore. I gave birth a week later to my daughter. And then, 8 weeks later, I returned to work. So I only had kind of 8 weeks off maternity because we'd had all the other launches going on. Wow. And it was amazing. Like I really, really enjoyed it. And again, I think that was that kind of problem solving mentality, all pitching in, all getting it done. And some of the more complicated launches like the Philippines, it was just such a huge learning curve. But it was great. Like I really can't tell you how incredible the Disney Plus team were, and how much of a brilliant experience it was. But as soon as the launch is finished, so we'd done those kind of 7 launches in 2 years. Lots of word came, there was a lot, we could see the share price wasn't doing so well, lots of conversations about Disney Plus not being profitable in the press and in the news. And we started to kind of feel that internally, and we knew a big restructure and reorg was coming. So we had 6 months of working with, budgets that had been slashed and slashed and slashed, and a lot of uncertainty. And that's really hard, like really, really, really hard. Something's coming, you don't know what, everyone's on edge. People start playing politics, which I just wasn't like prepared for at all, because I've come from agency, and in agency, there's very little internal politics in agency. It's much more you against the client as an agency rather than you against each other.
Yeah.
And I've never been in a corporate environment before, and I wasn't, I was just, the scale of what I was doing, my team were producing around 20,000 social posts a year. Really? So the scale of that my team and the agencies, the amazing agencies that we work with, it was hard. Like, I was head down, and didn't really fully kind of see what was going on. And then, we kind of got the call. It was like last summer, and 7,000 people at Disney got laid off last summer.
Jeez. And that was global, right?
That was global, yeah, that was global. But there's a lot of people in Singapore as well, hundreds of people in Singapore. Yeah. Singapore is like kind of a big hub for the region. There's still offices in each market, but Singapore is a big hub for the region. And a lot of people from Disney Plus went as well. And that's very understandable. First of all, it's where they had to show the biggest savings within the business, but it's also where they'd hired a lot of kind of expensive, amazing talent to come and do these launches. Yeah. Now the big launches were over. It was kind of, okay, we need to downsize the team. And kind of a lot of it defaulted to the team that had been at Disney for a long time, or been at the studio side for a long time. So that was kind of the Disney experience and the Disney journey. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I learned so much in such a short amount of time. I think like redundancy is really hard. Okay, it's my first time being made redundant, my first time kind of being laid off in that sort of scale. But in the lead up to it, those 6 months where we knew a restructure was coming, we knew it was going to be bad, we could see it, given, the budgets that we were having to work with, we could see it in what we were being told to do. And sitting for 6 months in that unknown, not knowing when it was going to come, when it's going to hit you, knowing something bad's coming, feeling people playing politics, people getting, worried about their jobs, and feeling that every day for 6 months was horrible. Like really, really was horrible. And I think I had kind of got in my head, I was like, the launches are done, things are kind of running themselves. I don't quite like how things are feeling at Disney and how they felt to me and how toxic it felt at times. Right. I was like, this is not like the environment that I want to do and the work that I necessarily want to be doing. And so I kind of had one foot out the door, and there was this part of me was kind of wishing and hoping that I would actually be made redundant, because it was going to give me some money that would buy me some time to recover, like mentally and physically, to spend some time with my family, my kids, and really think about what I want to do next. And so when it came, it was this really kind of weird, like bittersweet, like there was this part of me that just felt so much relief that it was over and that we weren't having to go through that waiting anymore, and that I wasn't going to have to be in that environment anymore. And there was this just happiness, because it was like, right, I've got to have this money that I'm going to get to really figure out what I want to do, and I've got a little bit of time. And then there was this sadness, right? There's this feeling disappointed, feeling like it didn't end on my terms, feeling like, why is this happened? Why me? Was it the work that I did? What did I do to piss people off? What did I, what's wrong with me? Why me? And it's this real kind of like, there was just this contradiction, and I would be swinging from feeling really, really happy and relieved to actually feeling really like just sad. Because it's not nice. Like, it's really, really hard and horrible thing to go through.
I mean, there's lots of things at play, isn't there? And equally, it's slightly, it might not be the right analogy, but it's like almost like any sort of toxic relationship. There's still something that you miss. You break up with a partner and you know that it's not quite right. There's still a weird, you're still happy that you've happened, but there's still a natural kind of, it's something you've been familiar with, and there's a natural grieving when something disappears, right? And you leave something in your life like that. I think it's totally normal. And there's so much, the family is the wrong word, and I've never thought work was a family at all, but you spend so much time with these people, your colleagues, that, you do form a lot of bonds. And when that's removed, either by choice or force, like in your case, there's a reaction to that, right? And you're a senior person there, so you're responsible for a lot of people. I found it bad when you kind of like your teams and stuff, and when you've got to let go of them and things. It's always hard, even though sometimes it's for the right reasons. But I think it's normal, totally normal to feel both sides of the coin. I totally get it.
Yeah, and like, half my team went, and the half that stayed, like the grief that they felt and the guilt that they felt, that survivor's guilt, and even kind of a year or so after, they still just like feeling like insecure about their jobs and feeling worried, feel like they don't know what's going on. And, it takes such a long time to build the culture back up in an organization after that's happened, that, I think, again, in hindsight, like, I'm really happy that I wasn't one of the ones that stayed, because, even a year later, it's still very, very hard for them at times.
Yeah, I imagine, because again, you're still operating on, the business challenges that organizations like Disney and lots of other organizations are facing at the moment. It's clear in the UK at the moment, like Dyson, which I know is obviously, they have their headquarters now in Singapore, but they just went through a huge restructuring. I think it was 3,000 people let go in the UK offices. So there's this huge, outpouring of Dyson folk appearing on LinkedIn now who've, been at Dyson 10, 12, 15 years, and all of a sudden they're out on the rear type thing. And you can see a lot of anger and a lot of shock and a lot of, in some cases, probably relief, when there's like you say, you sometimes get that sense of what's the right thing for me and the time is right. One thing which I can't say, and I read it terribly, we touched on, which was why I thought it'd be super interesting, not only to hear your story and also for people to hear that it's not just the UK. And I don't know why I'm fascinated with people understanding that, but there's something, I think it helps people to understand that it's a time in history at the moment where the world is going through a lot of things, and the kind of interconnected market and advertising world that we all work in and operate in, it's impossible not for things to be connected, right? We live in a globally connected world now. So I wanted people to hear that you've gone through something similar in Singapore as a marketeer and an ad person, because it gives a sense of the people listening to this predominantly in the UK, which is going through a torrid time at the moment. It's almost like it's not just me, it's not just the person listening, it's happening to lots and lots of really talented people all over the world. It's not to say it makes it okay, but it makes it, you just take a little sense of, oh Christ, okay, there's a bigger thing at play, and not taking it personally, I think, is a big part of your progress of then how you move on to the next thing. Because like you say, most people go through quite dark times when these things happen, either redundancy or freelancers not being able to find new things. I'm having lots of chats with people who are going through quite dark times because it's hard. There's when the wolf's knocking at the door, and you're so used to having a full-time job or a steady stream of work, consultancy work, freelance work, and that dries up. It's proving really difficult for people. Which leads me to the kind of sobriety piece. Now, I know we talked offline, and it's not. I don't think there was a direct correlation with your choices around now becoming sober. And I want to preface for people: it's not like you were Liam Gallagher 24/7 and now you're sober. I think if you're open to it, Michelle, just give people that arc and how it maybe coincided with some of these career issues and career factors, and then what it's led to. Because I think what I'd quite like people to understand is, out of all of the darkness of redundancy or being in the Badlands, there are things that you can do that can then drive you to your next phase of life, which you're clearly doing. And I found it super inspirational when we spoke. So would you mind telling that story?
Yeah. So back when I was in London and I was kind of in that cycle of the drinking, the work hard, play hard, and everything that kind of goes along with that. I'd probably go as far to say that was like my rock bottom. And but I just knew I had to leave. I knew there was something, like I needed to get out of that cycle. I needed to break that cycle. And coming back into Singapore, and we mentioned, going to Club Street and going to the bars. Yes, there was drinking and there was partying and everything, not to the same extent that there is in London, for many reasons about what you can and can't do in Singapore. But I kind of set some more boundaries, and that definitely didn't stop me at times. I would definitely kind of be throwing up outside a car window here in Singapore, but for a whole, the partying slowed down. Got married, had 2 children. My children are now 3 and 5, and COVID hit. We had my children around COVID time. My son was born a year just before COVID. He was 1 when we went into lockdown, and just coming out of COVID, coming out of having children, I slowly started to kind of re-enter the world and started to go out, have some drinks again. And I was working at Disney, was working on these launches. And, when I say drinks, I would probably go out once every 2 or 3 months and have a big night out where I'd have more than 4 or 5 drinks and would probably be throwing up on the way home. Other than that, I would probably maybe have 1 or 2 glasses of wine a week. Like, I really wasn't drinking a lot. It definitely wasn't alcohol dependency in any way. It was all what we would kind of call grey zone drinking, or even less than grey zone drinking. Like, I was probably drinking a very, low amount, or a very safe amount as to what, governments would advise. But I wasn't coping well with things. So when I was at Disney, I was like, the stress with work, like I wasn't coping very well with, navigating corporate life, and the launches were incredibly stressful, and teams and all of the layers that comes with that. Sometimes like my anxiety would just be like over the edge, that if someone said boo to me, I would start crying. It was like I just wasn't coping at times, not all the time, just at times. I didn't have a lot of patience with my kids. My kids were 3 and 1, and I was just struggling being a new mom and everything that comes with that. I had also signed up for the Singapore Marathon, which is something that I'd always wanted to do. I'd always wanted to run a marathon. I thought, I'm done having kids. I'm a year postpartum. I want to start training. I want to do the marathon. But I just felt like everything in my life, I just wasn't quite reaching my full potential. Like something was holding me back. And I felt like no matter what, if I try my absolute best at work, as being a mom, at my training, I would only be 90% of what I thought I was actually capable of. And I tried everything, right? Because like you're socially conditioned to not believe that it's the alcohol. Like alcohol is how we relax, it's how we celebrate, it's how we commiserate, it's how we, connect with each other. Like we are conditioned to believe that, alcohol is the thing that's going to help our stress. It's the thing that's going to, help you relax. And this is how you celebrate, your runs and your marathons. That's how you reward yourself when you've got a good training session. It's like, oh, go to the pub because you've earned it. Mum needs a wine, that whole kind of mummy culture around drinking. And I just didn't think it was a problem because I was drinking so little. But then with the marathon training, I was like, I'm going to quit this. And within a few weeks and months, I just could not believe the transformation that had occurred. And, when I talk about kind of reaching that full potential, I was exceeding it in everything that I wanted to do. I had so much more capacity to take on even more, to think more clearly. It was unreal. And considering I was only having a couple of drinks a week, those couple of drinks were the things that were making everything feel unmanageable. And as soon as I removed that, I felt like I could accomplish so much more.
Well, it's just, I think one of the, well, firstly, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. And I've had phases in my life where I haven't drank for, months on end, genuinely months on end. And it's not out of a conscious decision, but maybe I was just super into fitness at the time, or maybe after a breakup, when you kind of genuinely start to look after yourself, when you're, and it does feel like when dark times happen, you do assess and you think, well, actually, could I be better at X, Y, and Z? So I think it's quite normal. The reason I thought it'd be interesting, numerous reasons why I thought it'd be interesting for people to hear is I've noticed in my time in the Badlands whilst job hunting, and I'm the father of a 4-year-old, and kind of, I'm probably, drinking's the wrong word. I'll have a gin and tonic every night. And genuinely, that's probably been the last year, essentially, that's coincided with being in the Badlands and not working. Like it's almost not, it's such a different thing for me. And I think it is a little bit of trying to just, get that moment of, after a day of job hunting and all that comes with that, and, dealing with children and all the things like that. And it's weird. There was something when we spoke that I was like, man, it made me just reflect on what I'm doing. And I've noticed, this is boring for anyone who's not a parent, but I've noticed I'm so much better with my son if I hadn't had even one glass of wine the night before. It's totally better. It's, it's quite a selfish thing to have a drink for me. And I noticed it with my son. This is totally boring for anyone who doesn't have children. But that's my thing of it. And so, and equally, I've spoken to a lot of people in a similar position to you and I from a redundancy or in the Badlands point of view now. And it comes up quite a lot, I've noticed, the glass of wine at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. And it is baked into the culture, and it's baked into, being a parent. And, one of my wife's favorite shows that she made me watch, and then secretly I loved, was Motherhood, and how that on Netflix, and that show, just drinking is part and parcel of being a modern parent with 2 kids, having a couple of kids and full-time jobs and all of that type of stuff. And it's real. I think I'm slightly envious that you've done it, but equally I'm a bit like, well, I'm in control. I could do that myself. And And how have you found reactions to that? How, beyond your parent, your how have you found it with your husband, who went to the ends of the earth for you, and now he can't go out for a beer with his wife? You know, and the reason I ask that is because I love still going out with my wife. You know, go for dinner and stuff. It's nice. How does that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, you're so funny. You know what? It's great. Like, we still get to go out and have a great time, because the thing that made me stick to it was non-alcoholic alternatives.
Right.
They were like this bridge for me, and if they didn't exist in the way that they are now, I would have gone back to drinking.
Right.
So, like, if ever you read kind of Alan Carr, the guy who does the smoking, not the comedian, his books, and he's got books about kind of alcohol, and he talks about the little monster and the big monster. And you've got your little monster is your craving. It's like, you know, and after a week or so, like, whether it's sugar, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's alcohol, that physical craving goes away really quickly when you starve it of something. But it's actually your big monster, and your big monster is the lies and the beliefs that we have about that thing that keep you going back to it. And so I actually didn't want to drink for a long time before I stopped. I didn't like how it was making me feel. I didn't want to drink anymore, but I continued to drink, and I continued to drink because I thought that that's what I needed in order to have that connection. So, like, me and my husband, we drank on while we traveled, we drank on our wedding day, we drank when we were on our honeymoon. Like, you know, some of my most incredible moments of my life have been with a drink in my hand. You know, Beyonce at Glastonbury, yeah, of course I was drinking. You know, safari in Africa, yeah, I was having a drink. It's like some of the best moments of my life I was drinking. But it's, you know, I believed that I needed to have a drink in my hand in order to feel that same connection, or in order to have fun. And when you actually start to unravel, like, that's just not the case, and you don't need that at all, it's amazing. And that's why non-alcoholic alternatives were just so good for me, because the non-alc wine, beers, spirits have got so good now that when I grabbed a non-alcoholic beer, when everybody else was having a beer, or a non-alc wine, or a non-alc gin, or whatever it was, it looked like alcohol, it smelled like alcohol, it tasted like alcohol. I felt included in what everyone else was doing. I had the prop in my hand, it was like a crutch, but I just didn't have any of the negative effects with alcohol. And it was enough. Like, it was more than enough.
Right.
And that was the thing that I just, like, totally and utterly blew my mind, because I was like, oh wait, hang on a minute, I actually don't need alcohol to have a connection, to have a good time, to have the same experience. I actually just needed a drink in my hand.
So the habit piece, I'm like, kind of, there's the physical side of it is a large part of the mental side of it, right? Back in the day, I worked on an awareness thing around. We were trying to just get some huge behavior change in this particular medical thing. We were trying to write some comms for it, and it was all, and the insights were all around, if you could substitute some of the physical action, the mental side of it is easier then to cope with, which I guess is where, you know, fake cigarettes and all that jazz and vapes and all that shit come in for smokers. But talking out of my ass now, I've no idea. I have no idea at all.
But then kind of just bringing it back to kind of the redundancy and everything else is that I think, you know, and we saw this a lot in COVID. Let's talk about COVID and maybe when you're out of work. I think people either go one of two ways. Either kind of okay, you know, let's open a wine, I'm going to start drinking more, or people drink less and tend to throw themselves in to a new hobby, or get themselves fit, or, you know, go on kind of some personal development journey.
Well, a joke was became a drunk or a hunk in COVID, right? That's how I heard it described, and I was like, "Well, I'm really flirting with both."
I love that.
Yeah.
Drunk or hung. Oh my god, it's hilarious. Sorry, you just threw me then. Yeah. So look, I don't know. It's maybe if I just kind of continue telling the story a little bit from kind of the redundancy. So I think by the time I got made redundant, I'd stopped drinking for about a year, and I became really passionate about the non-alcoholic alternatives, and there wasn't a lot of people talking about them at the time. And I think when the category talks, they don't talk to the grey zone drinkers, or they didn't. They've got a lot better over the past few years. But, talking to, people like yourself, and it's like, okay, you want that 4 p.m. wine, or you want a 4 p.m. gin and tonic, try a non-alc version, because 9 times out of 10, it's going to take the edge off without giving you any of the negative effects of alcohol. And so I was redundant. I had a little bit of money in my pocket. I had some time, and I was like, okay, I don't want to rush back into another corporate job. I'm going to start exploring this thing that I'm really passionate about. So I joined a YouTube accelerator course with Ali Abdal. And I'm a real productivity nerd as well. Like, I love any ways that I can kind of optimize my time and be more efficient. So I joined his YouTube accelerator and started learning YouTube as a creator. And honestly, it's probably been the most humbling experience of my life. Like, I've built social media for some of the world's biggest brands, and going to try and do it yourself is shockingly hard, especially when you don't necessarily know that, you're kind of figuring out the positioning and what you are and who you want to talk about as you go. And
we spent our careers helping others tell their story, whatever shape or form that may take. The amount of marketeers and agency folk I've spoken to in this Badlands time, we're all terrible at self-promotion, terrible at understanding how we communicate about our skills and ourselves, in order to find a new job and stuff. It's laughable. Yeah. It's really, really funny.
It's, shocking, like really, really shocking. But you know what? I learned, and I'm going to be really honest. I was like, I've got this. I'm going to be monetized in 3 months. I'm have like hundreds of thousands of followers. Like, I know this. And it just brought me down a peg or two, to say the least. In a good way, though. And, actually, I just learned to let go and enjoy the process and enjoy the journey of creating content and just figuring out what I want to say and, what my message is. And that's kind of the YouTube evolved then into the podcast. And that's where I found my zone, where I felt really comfortable, and I started to just get so much out of the conversations that I was having with people. I was learning so much and just enjoying the process of creating and making and throwing myself into it. And it's been a real joy. And I think, like I said, I was like, I really had big ambitions to make money from it. And that's just not happened at all. And it's not going to happen, and not going to happen for a long time if it ever does happen. But what I've got out of it and the conversations has just been so much more rewarding.
Yeah.
And as part of that, very kind of linked to the redundancy as well, is I took the time, and I'm very aware that I'm in a very privileged position, that I did get a good payout, that I could take some time off and really like work on myself, take care of my family, take on this kind of creative project of, creating content around in the non-alc space. But I did a lot of work on myself as well. And that's all kind of happened in line with the kind of creating content and trying to figure out my story. I did a lot of work on my limiting beliefs, on what was holding me back, what I really believed about myself. I felt that I wasn't smart or capable enough to, achieve what I wanted. I felt at times that I felt a lot of shame and regret around kind of how I behaved with alcohol. I felt like I didn't deserve to put myself out there. I felt like I didn't deserve to be seen and have my story wasn't relevant. And I worked through a lot of that. Like, I worked with a therapist. I sat and spent time on like really thinking about, who do I want to be? Like, not just what I want, and I read lots of manifesting books, and I'm a big fan of like manifesting, but, figuring out, rather than just kind of doing a mood board of like, this is what I want my life to be like, I actually went kind of one step before and really started to think about, who do I want to be? And sobriety and redundancy has like a tendency to bring up a lot of shit. Like, it really brings up a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that maybe you've buried. And I think probably in sobriety, you start to feel stronger and feel ready to start dealing with it. And in redundancy, it forces you to. And so, yeah, I just was like, okay, who do I want to be? And what are my values? Like, and I don't think I'd ever written down my values. Like, I'd never clearly identified what my values were. And I spent a bit of time like figuring out what was important to me, and, you know, self-improvement, my health and wellness. Like, I value experiences over things. Like, I'm not about the stuff, you know. I'd rather go and spend time with people that I loved. And as soon as I started to align myself and become really clear on who I am, what I want to do, who I am and what my values were, what's important to me, everything else started to fall into place with what I do. And so, you know, the podcast, I've just succumbed to the journey with that, and I'm letting it evolve in its own time, how it does. And I'm just trying to learn from every conversation that I have and get what I can out of every conversation. I set up my own marketing consultancy, and I really spent the year cherry picking just the projects that I felt the most connected to and that were so aligned with my values. And 4 weeks ago, I joined a new startup that I can't tell you too much about on here just yet, but it's just so incredible, and it's just so aligned with my values and my story around ways to unlock potential. And, you know, like I said, I'm very, very, very lucky to have the time and the money and the supportive family to be able to take, you know, the year to really figure out who I am and what I want to do. But in doing that work on myself, everything else has just fallen into place.
Yeah. No, it's well, thank you for sharing. It could be as simple as just thinking, you know what, I'm going to go get a little bit healthy. I'm going to go for that walk every day, or there's just little steps, right? It might sound a bit overwhelming. And I go through phases of, you know, knowing, well, maybe I get a little bit fitter and then I'll be a bit better with my son. And I think it is just about taking every day and taking little steps, right? And was your sobriety, did you just turn it off in one go, or did you dial it down?
Hold on 1 second, Gerard. Okay, yeah, I'll be there 2 minutes. Thanks. Sorry. Guys,
No,
just let me go.
fine.
You have to cut that bit.
No. I don't cut anything. Amazon's been since we've been chatting, so.
Okay.
It's a professional service we have here, Michelle. It's professional. It's very professional. No, look, it's all of those things will resonate with people, and clearly there are some differences attached to your version of it and your opportunity that you have with, you know, post redundancy. But I hope there would be little things that people might take and go, you know what, I could look at that. Or it's come up a lot with my chats with folk when you kind of go through the shitty time. It does give you time to actually think about yourself, because we weirdly, when we're in work, which is the thing you'd really wanting to be doing again, it's not necessarily the best version of yourself. You're hectic, it's nonstop, and you don't get time to look at some of the things you should be dealing with as an adult, or, you know, some of the health things or whatever it might be, you know. So there is a weird, and there's a guilt I felt attached to it when I started to feel okay about being in the Badlands, because I was getting to try a couple of new things and, you know, learn some new things. You know, there's a guilt that comes out. I'm not earning money. I'm not doing. But then weirdly, it's almost like I had to take that time and just go, you know what, I have to apply something to this shitty time. And it sounds like you've gone through that yourself.
Definitely. Sorry, just want to say 2 books that I really recommend.
I was just going to ask you about the books, because when you told me about it before, I was like, oh, that's wife present right there for my wife. She's going to love this. Go for it.
So 2 books that I really recommend and that really helped me during this time was, first of all, Manifest by Roxy Nafusi. Some people think manifesting is really woo, and the book's not too woo. So it's really great. It's quite practical in terms of like identifying who you are, what you want, looking at your limiting beliefs, and getting yourself into action. And it's really, really kind of practical way of starting to work through things. And the second book that I just loved was The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And it's a 12-week kind of book that you do, and you do a chapter each week. And it's really kind of about uncovering like your creative side and the artist within, but it's also about kind of figuring out who you want to be and what you want to do and what you enjoy. And each week you have to do daily journaling, and then each week you have to take yourself on an artist date, and that can be anything, just yourself, and you take yourself out and you go and do something. I did everything from like pottery to jewelry making to, you know, sitting and drawing palm trees on Sentosa, you know. But it was a really nice experience. And then you do all of these other tasks, and as you kind of come out of the book, you just feel like a new version of yourself is coming out, and things become a lot clearer and things start happening. And it's a really, really special book. And I think in redundancy, anyone in the advertising world, you know, if you've got 12 weeks, it's a really nice thing to do. And there is a little bit of work attached to it, but it's wonderful.
Well, we like a project and we like a bit of structure. And these things, when they do disappear, you know, you kind of workday structure, you do. Some people go through that phase of really struggling with their own structure of their day and stuff. So all of these things are going to be super useful when I put this episode out for people to take off. I think finally, my question would be, do you ever think, oh, just have a glass of wine? Like, how are you now in a place where you're cool and comfortable with it?
I'm totally past that. Like, even if I have a sip of someone's wine now, all I can taste is the ethanol, and I've totally lost the taste for it. I definitely don't want it. And, you know, I went out on Friday to kind of like a big club DJ. It was like a F1 party, and crypto bros everywhere. And I you know, a bit nervous beforehand. I was like, God, how am I going to get through this without a drink? But, you know, I got there, danced, had a brilliant night, and eventually you just forget about it, and you don't even want it anymore.
And equally,
it's awesome.
When I've been out and not drank and everyone else is around you, you quickly realize what a bunch of fucking idiots you are. Like, you know, you just think, oh my God, this is usually how you are behaving, you know, and you just think, oh my God.
But you just realize how much the music, the lighting, just being in that environment, the energy is a placebo as well, because like it all, you know, I've got a non-alc beer in my hand, and then I've got all these other things happening. I almost feel drunk. I almost feel on the same level as everyone else. So much of it is a placebo as well. And I think, you know, as long as you're kind of opening yourself up and you're not just feeling like you're depriving yourself all the time. So if you come at it from a place of deprivation, you're never going to enjoy like the sobriety. You know, it has to kind of come from a different mindset. But now it doesn't even cross my mind anymore, even though I talk about it every day on the podcast.
Well, it's going to be my final question. Like, clearly, it's not a thing of where you've just hidden it, and it's almost like you've gone the other way, and you talk about it a lot, but the positives of not doing it as opposed to dwelling on missing it or things like that. So I understand how that works. I know you've mentioned your podcast. Clearly, I'm going to link to it and things, but do you just remind everyone what it's called and where they can find it?
Yeah, of course. So it is the Upward Spiral podcast. Sorry, I was like, I want to do kind of a little blurb for this, because it's, I've been almost kind of like working on my podcast branding a little bit, and I've just been kind of tweaking it slightly, because I really want to lean in to the journey of self-discovery and unlocking your true potential. So the Upward Spiral, on it, we explore the transformational power of what we call intentional living. And that began for me with like reevaluating my relationship with alcohol. But we really starting to dive into like really inspiring stories of personal growth, practical strategies for enhancing well-being, and just really connect with people as well who are shaping the alcohol-free culture. Most of my guests, I'd say half my guests drink, half of them don't. It's not another preachy sobriety podcast. It's really just about anyone who's maybe reevaluating their relationship with alcohol, or who is looking at how they can maybe unlock a little bit more of themselves, a little bit more of their potential.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's on Spotify and Apple and
YouTube. So everything's filmed, videoed. So so you can come and actually see our faces on YouTube.
Wow.
You can find us.
Just finally for the guest, I said to Michelle, there's no way it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I've just done the school run. I look like shit. You're in a professional lit studio. You look amazing. You don't drink. You're doing marathons. There's no way I'm putting myself side by side with you on a fucking podcast video. But yeah, Michelle's is full soup to nuts video content and all sorts. There's some amazing, amazing stories and some amazing chats. So I'll definitely be pushing it out. Michelle, don't worry about that.
Yeah,
amazing. Look, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to kind of tell people about your journey, your career, and the kind of nightmare of being made redundant. Although it sounded like it was, would you say, just as it's actually a good thing for you that it happened?
Yeah, definitely.
Where you've ended up,
definitely. Yeah. Like, you know, without getting too woo, it was meant to happen.
Amazing.
You know, meant to happen.
If people take one thing from that, there was one of my previous guests who I've become, you know, conversational with outside of our initial chats. We're really trying to help each other and we're checking on each other. She's lovely. She didn't get something the other day that she'd kind of had her heart set on a little bit. And I just sent to her, you're just not meant to work at that one. The one you get is the one you're meant to work at, right? And I'm a big believer in that serendipity around, you know, sliding doors and all that shit. So I kind of buy into it a little bit. Don't tell my wife because she's banging on me about it a lot. But so, look, Michelle, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for your time. It was nice to reminisce about Club Street and all those.
Oh, thank you for having me. I hope this is really helpful for anybody who is going through it. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn, and we'll just see if we can help you in any way. You know, we've got some connections and stuff. So
no, for sure. I mean, I'll be putting all the links and all that jazz when we post this out. So
yeah,
I think with that, I've actually got some stuff to do today, which is rare. And
I got to go home and feed the kids.
Yeah, it's end of day for you there in Singapore, and I'll be in Singapore at Christmas, so maybe we'll go and have a non-alcoholic wine together.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Well,
okay, thank you so much.
Just stay on the line a second, Michelle. I just wanted to ask you something.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.